Welcome to Moving Through and Beyond, a podcast dedicated to sharing inspired journeys of redefining life, vision, and purpose after immense hardship and grief. My goal with this podcast is to give you hope and to let my guest journeys inspire you to make the choice to keep looking up. I'm your host, Carey Conley. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Moving Through and Beyond. I'm Carey Conley, your host, and I have a very special woman here with me today. She's been on before, and to date, it's probably the most viewed podcast since I launched the podcast series a year and a half ago. I'm going to introduce her to you, but I want to kind of cue this up and tell you why I brought her back. I think a lot of you know my story so far, but I will tell you again that I, in 2017, lost my 25-year-old son and have a 23-year-old daughter at the time. And it's unimaginable for people to even think about somebody losing a child. I think it's probably the worst thing somebody can imagine. So when a parent goes through that, they go through so much of their own inward healing, shock, disbelief, learning to live without this child in their life, that I think the siblings kind of get lost in that healing process. And looking back on it, I can realize that I really was not paying so much attention to how my daughter was doing, losing her brother. We've talked a lot about it now. This has been years ago that this happened. But it revealed a lot to me as to what it might feel like to not actually have a sibling that you grew up with. So I asked Elizabeth Boisson to come back. She's the founder of Helping Parents Heal, huge organization around the world, tens of thousands of members. I can't even imagine. And a lot of parents, obviously, who have lost children lots of different ways of all ages. I found Elizabeth through a mutual friend who I've also had on the podcast. Her name is Sue Frederick. And Sue introduced me to Elizabeth years ago, and I ended up going to their big conference that they hold every other year. Met all of these parents, obviously, but then I learned that there is an arm of Helping Parents Heal, this organization that is for siblings who have lost their brothers and sisters. So I asked Elizabeth to come back and kind of reveal a little bit more information on what that looks like to have somebody who has a sibling, has lost their sibling. So I thank you for coming back and talking about this.
I'm thrilled to talk about it. It's wonderful to be able to recognize these kids who are going through something that's as difficult or even more difficult than what we're experiencing, but that are often silent about it and often don't want us to know that they are going through these issues, because they first and foremost want us to heal. Mm-hmm. They want the family to come back to the same way that it was before their sibling transitioned.
Right.
But it is a very hard thing for them to learn how to heal. So our group, Helping Siblings Heal, is a wonderful place for them to be able to talk amongst themselves without having any adults there, so they can say, "You won't believe what my mom did today. Oh my gosh, she stayed in bed and cried the whole day. I didn't know what to do because," and then another sibling can chime in and say, "Well, that same thing has been happening with my mom. What do you think we can do about it?" I think that they truly feel that they are not allowed to heal until we are healed. And so
that's interesting to me, Elizabeth, because not to cut you off, but already all these new things that I'm hearing from you, right, that you just don't realize that, I'm sure looking back, my daughter just wanted nothing but for normalcy again. Unfortunately, as most of my listeners know, and I lost my husband 3 years prior to losing my son. Yeah. So there was so much going on. Her whole world changed, right? Losing a parent and then a sibling. And not thinking about it, I didn't realize how much she didn't want to share with me, because she wanted me, like you just said, to get better. She still does to this day. She just constantly is saying to me, "I just want you to be happy, Mom."
Yeah.
Right?
Of course, and it's doubly hard for you, obviously, to have that happen in such a short space of time, too. But one of the things that is important to realize about these kids too, is that they are more intuitive than we are. And so Helping Parents Heal talks about the signs and the connections that we have with our children in spirit. A lot of times these brothers and sisters, their intuitive capacities are blown open by having a brother or sister pass. They are so much more intuitive than they ever were before, and it's kind of scary to them because they might have, first of all, their brother or sister bringing through messages to them. They're not sure if they can share them with their parents because they're not sure how their parents feel about that. But then they also sometimes become so intuitive that they actually see other children who, in Helping Parents Heal, we talk about the fact that our light shines brighter. And so souls in spirit can actually see that light, can see that bright light that they can go to because they know that they can see them and understand them and maybe help to get them closer to their own parents. But a lot of times these kids are not ready for that. They don't want to have to deal with that. And
so define intuitive a little bit more.
So intuitive means that, for instance, both of my daughters started seeing spirit when Morgan transitioned. It wasn't something that they wanted to do because, in spite of the fact that I think that most Shining Light parents are very excited about seeing these different validations that they get, and knowing that our kids are with us because of the license plate in front of us that has the exact right meaning for us, or birds that come to us at different times, or for me it was bobcats that would come directly up to us in spur cross because Morgan was a wild cat at the University of Arizona, and they'd be purring beside us. But
and Morgan was your son that passed.
Yes, exactly.
And talk a little bit about that.
So Morgan transitioned at the base camp of Mount Everest in Tibet when he was going to school at the University of Arizona, but he was a cheerleader at the University of Arizona, and so bobcats, wildcats have a lot of significance for us. But I think that for the siblings, first of all, they probably have never seen anything like this before. They don't necessarily want to experience it. And I know that for one of my daughters, she was very excited about the signs that were coming to her. And she was actually working with a medium. But then...
Did you work with mediums prior to losing your son?
Never.
So this was like...
Never.
This all opened up.
And you know what's so interesting is that we did go to traditional therapy because I thought I needed to take them to traditional therapy.
Yeah.
They didn't want to, and they didn't feel that it helped. And so I had a friend who wanted to kind of mentor her to help her put a golden bubble of protection around herself. Because one of the problems that she had was that she would astral travel whenever she would fall asleep. And especially if she fell asleep on the sofa, any place that wasn't normal. And then when she astral traveled, which is something that a lot of us aspired to because we'd love to be able to do that, she didn't want to do it, first of all. But then when she got back to her body, she would see her body down below her and not be able to get back in. And so the medium that she was working with was to help her kind of turn these abilities off so that they weren't always bombarding her.
Okay.
My other daughter was having the same kind of things happening, but she was less vocal about it.
I was going to ask, were they telling you this when it started happening for them?
Well, the one daughter did because it was very scary for her.
Yeah, sure.
The other daughter, for years, didn't really tell me that these things were happening, and she tried to turn it off herself. I know that as they get older, they're going to want to turn all of that back on. And I've heard of so many stories of people, when they're younger, having these things happen, needing to be able to go into studies and then also going into the working world and not wanting anybody to think you're different. And then once you maybe have a tragedy like this happen in your life, being able to turn those abilities back on again. So
I'm so intrigued by how the siblings are coming together in your group, Elizabeth, because they do need to talk about what's going on, and I'm sure that they don't. And it's interesting to me, like, is there an age, a general age that they all are, or is it a wide variety of ages?
It's a wide variety, but they have to be 18 and older to be able to participate in the different events that they have for Helping Parents Heal, just because it's normal for them not to be younger than 18. And at the conference, we had special events for siblings as well. And a lot of the volunteers at the conference were siblings. And I think that they really like being involved in what we're doing, their parents. But again, I don't think that they want to make it something that is 24 hours a day, the way that for you and for me, healing is a 24-hour-a-day endeavor, and we're constantly finding new ways to move forward and feel better, but also to connect with our kids in spirit. In fact, one of my daughters studied in London, and then she was actually in a job for about a year, and her sister came over to see her in London, and they were having drinks with friends. And my youngest daughter had a medallion of her brother around her neck. And one of my eldest daughter's co-workers said, "Oh, who is that?" And she said, "Oh, it's my older brother, Alix's older brother. He passed at the base camp of Mount Everest in Tibet." And Alix had never told anyone at work about her brother because she didn't want to be that person that everyone felt sorry for. She wanted to be anonymous in this new job. And I think that is something that is very different from parents and from children or their kids, because the kids don't want to grow up being the sister or the brother of that boy or that girl who passed. It's a very difficult title to carry. And I think that you and I are much more mature, and it's easier to have people maybe see us and decide they don't want to talk to us even though we've known them for 10 years and walk the other way. Whereas for kids, it is something that's very difficult. So those are the types of things that all of these kids who get together in Helping Siblings Heal are able to discuss and talk about.
That is fascinating because, we went through that. We've lost my husband and my son both to suicide. And so because we grew up in a big neighborhood, big church, we knew a lot of people, the very first thing that happened, of course, is that it changed how everybody saw us. You could just see when we went to the grocery store how they looked at us, when we went to church, it was a totally different look, They literally would look at me, Elizabeth, and smile, and then they go, it was always And so when we moved, my son at the time that my husband passed, he had accepted a job in Arizona. We were from Colorado. And I know that it was so much easier for him to start his life in Arizona because very few people knew the story of his dad unless he chose to tell it. And it was easier for my daughter to go back to college in Oklahoma because she didn't need to tell anybody. So I totally resonate with this. And I know my daughter does too. Because, especially because they were just starting their life. They were just getting started. So I totally understand what you're saying.
Well, and I think that it's something that for us, we sometimes feel like, why aren't our kids talking to us about this more? Why aren't they talking to their friends about this? Or why don't they want to go to a therapist about this? But it's something for them that they really feel it's almost like a stigma to them to have this either brother, sister, anyone, or a father who's transitioned. And so, again, their healing trajectory is very different. And they could seem completely fine in the very beginning because they're trying to act fine for us. They're trying really, really hard to show us that they're going to be the same. They're going to be fine. So we all need to be fine as well. But I think that it comes out later when the pressures of life are a little more difficult, when they're maybe not at home anymore as well. But there is hope, and I really think it's important for people to understand that these are the kids that we call the indigo kids that are going to be growing up to be some of the most compassionate people possible. And I know that even just seeing my two daughters wanting to help people all the time, I know that that comes from having their brother transition.
Sure.
And I'm sure that your daughter's the same way. That it's
very mature for her age.
Very mature, but also very compassionate.
Right.
And I think that, for instance, I was talking to my younger daughter yesterday, and she was saying that when she's in a group meeting and someone is hurting and she sees that, she'll look around, like a lot of times she'll be directing the meeting, look around, see if anybody else is going to help. And this has happened several times. We just talked about it last night. No one else will. And so she'll be the one going over and seeing if this person needs help and how to help the person. And she said, Mom, we talk a big game in a lot of these different things that we do, but really nobody, I guess, feels courageous enough to offer a hand to somebody when they need it in this age group that I'm talking about. And then she was saying, I wonder if it would be that way in France too, because we lived in France for a long time, and I really truly believe that it would be that way as well. And she was saying there was a story in the paper where there were 160 people watching while a woman was being killed, and no one was doing anything because everyone thought somebody else was going to do something. I think that our kids, these indigo kids, these kids who have been through the worst thing that could ever happen in their lives, are the ones that are going to reach out and do something to help that person.
Yeah, and yes, my daughter, very compassionate, very aware of everybody's feelings, especially mine. I think she knows how I feel better than I do a lot of times. And I also think, unfortunately, that it's put a lot of pressure on her now that she's the only child, right?
Yeah.
We kind of joke about it a little bit, Elizabeth, because I'm not dating, not remarried or any of that. And so I was talking to her the other day about my long-term life insurance that I'm putting. She's like, why are you thinking about that? And she gets concerned about it, about my health, living alone, who's going to take care of me. So I think that's a lot of pressure on them too.
I think it's a lot of pressure, and I think that they feel that they don't want to go too far from home to be able to make sure that even though they want to get away and not be recognized as that child who's part of that family, for instance. But but I do think that things like this draw a family together. And it's interesting because I was on a meeting last night, and one of the moms was saying that her mother was so advanced in terms of knowing about the afterlife and all of these different things that came up, and it was always so much fun just after her son passed to be able to talk to her mom about it. But not all moms are like that either. And I
totally
think
understand that.
I think that there are in every family, we find those people that we can depend on, but also in every friend group. So your friend group, when this happened to your husband and then to your son and your church, there were people, I'm sure, that were there for you. And then there were people who just didn't know how to handle it.
Yep.
And I think that that's also really important. It's important for siblings. It's important for us as well, for people to know that they don't have to say anything, and especially not things like, I don't know what I would do if something like this happened to me.
Right.
I would not even be standing. I'd probably just check out. That is not the right thing to say to a parent who's had a child transition or a spouse who's had their wife or husband transition. That's definitely not right. I think also saying things like, everything's going to get better soon. Just keep going, moving forward, and don't think about your child. Well, that is definitely not the right way to deal with it, because as you know, both of us talk about and think about our children
all the time,
24 hours a day.
And we want to talk about them.
And the most important thing is for our friends and our family to allow us to talk about them, because they feel to us as alive as they were here in the physical. And so for people to feel uncomfortable about the fact that we want to do a toast to them at Thanksgiving, for instance, or at graduation or things like that, it's 1 minute of their time in a year, whereas for us, that 1 minute is just so important. So I think that it's important for everyone maybe watching to understand that if your family members, if your friends are wanting to do something like that, to honor their children, not to feel uncomfortable, not to feel like, oh my gosh, they're going to burst out crying while they're doing this. And if they do, it's tears that are happy tears, not sad tears. It's tears because our friends are understanding us and want to help us to move forward.
Yeah. One of the things, so my daughter and I co-authored a book together. I think it was 1.5 years after Cole passed.
Beautiful book.
Yeah, thank you. Called Keep Looking Up. And it's several chapters of what we learned in the journey. And we do share a chapter in there about how we had to learn to give people grace and mercy. Because one of the hardest parts was seeing the people who did stand by us and still do, and the people who did not. And my daughter and I had to have conversations about this because it really hurt her feelings, I think, after Cole passed, when several of his friends had a hard time staying in touch with us. And I had to tell her, they just can't, right? But I'm happy to say that there were several of my son's friends that have stayed very close to me and very close to my daughter. And we love talking about them. I love getting messages from them saying, hey, I thought about Cole today. My son loved golf, Elizabeth. So, coming off of the
open.
big open that just happened here in Phoenix, that was his favorite event of the year. I get messages from his friends saying, hey, I'm thinking about Cole today. I love that. And I know it helps my daughter a lot, too.
Of course.
Yeah.
And, it's also really important for people to understand that they don't have to say anything. They can actually just come up to us in the grocery store and give us a big hug and say no words.
Yeah.
And those are the things that happened to me at the very beginning that meant the most of everything, because I realized that they don't have the right words, or they don't feel that they have the right words because they've never been through this before. Yeah. But to know that they stood firm and gave that hug was so meaningful. And I think that that's the same way for siblings. If siblings were able to have their friends do the same thing, just say no words, and be able to listen. I think that instead of telling them things that they should be doing and giving them advice that they don't really know anything about, just sitting and listening and saying, hey, tell me about Cole. I'd love to know more about his life. Can you show me some pictures of Cole?
Yeah.
Those are the things that I think siblings really need more of.
Yeah. Yeah, we make an effort to celebrate my son in lots of different ways, and my husband. We always hear from, again, his closest friends on birthdays, the anniversary, unfortunately, of his passing. It's meant a lot, especially to my daughter, now that she doesn't have any siblings left, for her to feel that she has these other brothers, her best friend, or, like sisters, right? Super close. So what would be one other thing, Elizabeth, that you might be able to share, especially for a parent that's listening right now, that they need to know about how they can help that sibling move on?
Well, I think that the most important thing, and I know that this is hard, is to start expressing gratitude in your own life. Meaning that every morning when I get up, I'm just so grateful to be getting up. I'm so grateful to be able to connect with the parents that I do as well. But I think that once they see us healing, maybe going hiking, doing the things that we used to do, I think that that is when they feel that they can actually start moving forward and healing as well. I think also that you can certainly reach out to your kids and say, hey, do you want to speak to a therapist? I have a lot of great people that I've heard of, but if they don't want to go, I think that it's really important not to force them. One of the worst things that we did was forcing them. I think they went to 3 each just because we thought that this was something that would help them.
Yep.
It made things worse for them. And I'm sure that there are some very good therapists out there, but I don't know if siblings are really ready to be. I think that if it's a therapist who has a sibling who's passed or who has had a child who's passed, I think that that is something that they can identify with a lot easier than going to someone who really doesn't understand what our situation is. And there are therapists like that, and I think that those are the ones that can do the most good for our kids. I also think that we have a tendency to try to hold on to our kids and keep them from traveling far distances and doing
I'm laughing because
things.
I'm thinking of my daughter right now.
I mean, my daughter...
This is so true.
My daughter, when she was 17, the year after Morgan transitioned, she went to Salamanca for the summer. I was beside myself, but I thought, I've got to do this. I also... she traveled around South America all by herself as well, but met up with different friends while she was down there. And I kept telling myself, okay, Morgan, take care of your sister. But we can't stop them from doing the things that they want to do. And they will be more adventurous just because of the fact that this has happened. I think that they realize they have a certain amount of time in their lives where they can do exciting things, and having a brother or sister transition makes them want to experience even more, so that they're doing it for their brother or their sister. So I would assume that that's the same case for her. Is that true?
Well, I would. You know, what's so interesting, Elizabeth, with my daughter, because a year after Cole passed, she got married. And the year after that, had baby number 1. And then 2 years later, had baby number 2. So her life went full throttle after that, right? But yeah, I would say she's definitely adventurous. I think she thinks outside of the box more. Definitely has matured a lot. And I was laughing about you. I wanted her. They live in Oklahoma, and I live in Arizona. But I still have an apartment in Oklahoma because I can't. I have to go back there at least every 4 or 5 weeks because I've got to be with those babies, right? And when I did that, when I told her I was moving back to Arizona because I missed it so much, she was thrilled, number 1. And number 2, she's like, "Why are you keeping an apartment here?" I said, "Because I just need to have one foot here still." Yeah. So I understand that.
That's wonderful. Can I just say one other thing that I think is kind of an interesting thing that's happened in our family? my daughter got married in May, and she married the man of her dreams. His brother transitioned during COVID while we were quarantining together. It's his twin brother.
Okay.
Alix, right after Morgan transitioned, said that she would never, ever be able to marry anyone who didn't know Morgan in life because she loves Morgan so much, and she knows that they all think he's a fabulous guy. But I also think that kids kind of gravitate to other kids who have been through similar situations because it's a bond that is unbreakable.
I would totally agree with that. And I'm so grateful that my daughter's husband knew Cole.
Yeah,
because
that's wonderful.
They have that
that's
shared memory. He never got to meet her dad, unfortunately, but he did love Cole. They would have been great brothers-in-law, right? But I know that helps her a lot.
But they still are.
Yeah, yes. You're such a great reminder of that for me. I appreciate you.
They still are, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like Patrick, who's Michael's brother, is Alix's brother-in-law. I feel like Morgan is Michael's brother-in-law as well. And I just feel like Michael and Alix are enormously helped by Patrick and Morgan in everything that they do. And I, not that kids have to marry someone who's had a child, a brother or sister transition.
That was just important to her.
But I think that it is something that makes that commitment and their lives moving forward easier.
Yeah, for sure.
And anytime that one of them is down about their brother or sister or their brother, they can talk to each other. The other one understands.
Yeah.
And for her to have this friend of Cole's, she can talk to him about Cole, which is wonderful.
Right. I always enjoy talking to you because you just broaden the picture of everything, Elizabeth, right?
Thank you.
And it is a good reminder of knowing that they are always here. We get signs all the time. My daughter went to the grocery store the other day and something happened, and it was an older gentleman who was helping her out. And she said when he turned around, he had a hat on, and on the front of the hat, all it said was Cole.
Oh.
She said, Mom, who has a hat with Cole on the front
Cole,
of it?
what is Cole? That's amazing.
Yeah, they definitely make themselves very present, especially around her and the grandbabies. Right?
That's wonderful.
And she talks to the kids about them.
The grandbabies might be seeing Cole.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they do.
They might be interacting with him.
Yeah.
I'm sure they saw him before they ever arrived here.
Oh, yeah. I have no doubt.
He held them in his arms before they got here.
It was so cool. Well, Elizabeth, thank you for coming back here.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing for people through your organization, helping parents heal. It's amazing.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad for our friendship.
Me too.
Yeah.
I am too.
Give me a lot of peace, and I appreciate that.
I'm so glad that Sue Frederick introduced us. Actually,
Yes.
Reverend Sue Frederick. now.
Right? Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Moving Through and Beyond. I hope that you were encouraged today. And I think the biggest message here for whether you're a parent, you've lost a child, or a sibling, is the message is you keep moving forward. It's not easy, trust me, I know. But it's important that you have a vision for your life. And it's important, especially if you're the parent, that your kids see you creating that new vision, that new dynamic of your life of now, how it is now. Because I will honestly tell you that my vision and my mission has pulled me through a lot, including losing my husband and my son. So I just want to encourage you today that if you are just feeling like you need a little help in that arena, to sit down and think about what you would like your future to look like now, and know that it impacts everybody that you're around, including your family members and your friends. So thank you for watching this episode of Moving Through and Beyond. I'm Carey Conley, just here reminding you to keep looking up. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please share it with a friend or a family member. In order to be successful on this mission, I can't do it alone. Connect with me at www.careyconley.com, and don't forget to sign up for my weekly Do It On Purpose newsletter. Let's build this life-giving vision movement together to end this epidemic, save lives, and create purpose.